Dive into this special episode from the Idea Citizen Summit, Leadership in a Changing World, powered by Cohesion, smart building technology. Learn more at cohesionib.com. I want to thank you for joining me today. I'm very honored and thankful that you're choosing to spend this morning with the Idea Citizen community, ultimately kicking off this 2-day event, which is centered on human-centered leadership, which is a pretty in-depth topic. And all the conversations moving forward are going to talk about different elements of it. Getting into this, one of the things that came to my mind was 70% of employee engagement is directly influenced by leadership. I don't think that we can marginalize the responsibility and impact that good leadership can have on a team, and on the flip, how bad leadership can sink an organization. And we'll go into a lot more detail about this, but I am Jackie DeMonis. I'm the founder of Idea Citizen. This is our first inaugural summit. I have two awesome speakers kicking this off with me. I have Rhett Power. Rhett Power is the CEO of Accountability, Inc. And we're going to get into kind of his leadership point of view. And then Michael Stallard also is the author of Fired Up and Burned Out, Connection Culture, and president of Connection Culture Group, an instructor for LinkedIn Learning's popular Creating a Connection Culture course, which I think plays into leadership very well. So let's kick this off with just leadership's perspective. Michael, what's your point of view regarding leadership at large?
Well, briefly, I believe that I spent my early career at Texas Instruments and then on Wall Street at Morgan Stanley and Citigroup. And I just saw that working with a lot of leaders as in investment banking, and then I've spent more than 20 years now in leadership and consulting. And tasks are very different. And, my employers, Texas Instruments and Morgan Stanley, very different tasks. But there's a lot of commonality in achieving leadership excellence. And that's what I've really focused on. I believe that every team, every organization should strive to cultivate a culture that connects people, which is around vision, value, and voice, a vision that inspires people, that serves the greater good, valuing people as individuals and not treating them as mere means to an end, and giving people a voice to share their opinions and ideas. And when you do those three things, people feel connected, and connection is a superpower that makes us smarter, happier, more productive, more resilient to cope with stress. And disconnection is a super stressor that brings about anxiety, depression, addiction, a higher risk of suicide and violence. So connection is a must. That's my leadership point of view.
Well, mine's pretty simple. I think accountability is the foundation of everything. I think great leaders take ownership first, model vulnerability, create cultures where people feel safe, trusted, connected, and connected to a larger purpose. I think leading with clarity and authenticity is critical. To always talk about a bias for action when I talk to my teams, because I believe this is sort of the end of it. I think when leaders are accountable, teams thrive. I think results follow. I think you have a fair workplace. I think you have the opportunity to have a special team, and actually I think accountability in this way is sort of an X factor, and it's a place where people love to work. It's a place where people know what they're supposed to do. They have clarity. There's transparency. And so that's sort of how I build teams, how I work with entrepreneurs to build their teams. So, yeah.
Does this directly correlate to increase in revenue, sales, profitability?
I mean, 100%. I mean, I don't know what a number is, but I know that when a team is aligned, and I know when a team is engaged, and I know when a team trusts the leadership and believes in the leadership that when you have I love saying this, but when you have a got your back culture, I mean, a watch your back
Not
culture,
a got ya.
your back culture, your team can do anything, right? When they believe in you and you believe in them, and that's real, you're unstoppable. So there is a direct correlation between a team that is, when a team is beat down and they don't trust their leadership and they don't trust the mission and they don't understand the mission and they're not engaged and there's no intentionality in the leadership to make things better. They don't listen to the people on the front lines. That's a team that's not going to win. And so I do believe there's a direct correlation between success and failure. I do.
Yeah, I completely agree with Rhett on all of the above. When leaders do connect with people, it brings about greater employee engagement, a higher strategic alignment, greater innovation because it cultivates people have a voice. So it cultivates a marketplace of ideas and people connect the dots and see new and better ways of doing things. They're also more agile and adaptable so they can more quickly pursue opportunities and respond to threats. So yeah, I think just, being familiar reading some of Rhett's work, I think we're very aligned. You look at it slightly different, but very aligned. And I think we've probably all worked in cultures where we felt fired up when we got there at the beginning of the day, and it just energized us. And it was a joy to be in an environment like that. And we've been in cultures that were sucking the life out of us. And we didn't change probably that much. It was something about that culture. And I think that's what we're getting at. And it's really important for the people who are participating today to be intentional about understanding what culture is going to bring out the best in them, and then being intentional about getting into that type of culture, because most cultures are not that, and they will suck the life out of you and also damage your career prospects if you're not in a culture that brings out your best.
Jackie, I'm going to wade into some dangerous territory here.
Let's do it. That's the conversation I'd like.
And it's just to reiterate what Michael said. It's pretty frustrating today to hear that, this kind of leadership is soft, or it's not the right way to lead, right? You got to lead with, this sort of top down, it's just the numbers don't bear that out. Like the productivity numbers, the success. When you look at the companies that are successful, they're not led like that in general. I mean, there are some examples of companies that are top down that do well, but in general, you're not going to build a great team by leading like that. So that's all I'm going to say. But I think that what we're talking about, Michael, is a leader that is connected to his team, to his people, or her team. They're engaged with them. They care about them. They're engaged in they want them to succeed. That's the kind of leadership that I think is going to succeed in the future. And that I know I've got 20-year-old boys. It's the kind of leadership they're going to demand, right? It's the kind of company that they're going to want to work for. They're not going to want to work for somebody that doesn't care about them, that doesn't understand them, doesn't try to understand them.
Yeah. When I have these conversations, I also like to kind of at least asterisk it a little bit with, I do think being able to demand and to be able to choose are also, to some degree, places of privilege. And not that anybody needs to feel bad about it and everything, but the ability to choose and not wait for, and not jump potentially on like the first opportunity that presents itself for a whole multitude of reasons. Call it, family commitments, transition, sick family, like maybe you're the only breadwinner. I think so. I like to just point that out, but I also like to acknowledge, like, you still want to go for the thing that, whatever the culture that looks like, that actually like drives you, feeds you, that is authentic to you, because it's really hard. I mean, I've been in a number of organizations where I'm like, okay, let me just fit into this culture. Okay, let me be this version of myself. And it's incredibly hard being inauthentic. And I think some people do a much better job at it. I think some companies, I really appreciate those companies that are really just transparent about what their culture is, because I've been in organizations where it's like, our objective is to increase shareholder value. And you know what? If that is your culture, fine. But let's just be honest about it and not pretend it's something else, because I think that there's a place for it all. But as long as you're informed going into it, I think it's no problem. Do you guys think that are we in a place of crisis, or are we a place of transition? I'm personally of the perspective that we are. Both of you are a little bit more seasoned than I am, and I've seen a segment of it, and maybe I've just started paying attention. But is this consistent to what you have seen historically, or are we changing things up a little bit?
Right. You want to take this one?
You go for it, man.
Landmines aplenty.
All right. Well, I do believe that we're in a time of transition. We're moving into kind of a postmodern world. And, there's some major challenges, but also opportunities that we face. One is we do have rising authoritarianism around the world. Will be the 20th consecutive year of rising dictatorships and declining freedom. And we're also seeing a decline in employee engagement. Employee engagement is at a 10-year low, according to Gallup, who, as far as I can tell, has the best research on this globally. So, and CEO of Gallup wrote a great book about it, declining engagement and wellness. It's really worth reading. We also have the AI tsunami coming, and that's going to bring productivity enhancement. It is already. I know it's really great as a writer. I find it really helpful even in editing, and it's going to create job creation, but it's also going to bring about job destruction, and that could have serious consequences, as we know what happened to the working class in America and what it's done politically. We have the U.S. withdrawing from leading the observance of the rules-based post-World War II environment around the world. So, we have a higher risk of wars. We've had 80 years of no wars among major powers. We could see that change given the U.S. backing out of that role if somebody doesn't step in to that role. Climate risks that we have, potential economic decline from trade wars and the amount of the U.S. debt, and social unrest from all the above. Now, the positive way to flip this,
I was like, is it coming?
Positive aspect, that sounds dire, right? However, if you do create a healthy culture, it helps you solve these problems. We're working on a book right now with Alan Mulally. Here's a guy who, and Rhett knows him too. Alan, he has led two miraculous events in his life. One is he led the building the Boeing 777, which still is one of the most sophisticated, complex machines ever built by humankind, that flies halfway around the world safely and efficiently. It's probably the best project Boeing has ever undertaken. And then he left and became CEO of Ford and turned around Ford when it was months from bankruptcy. And, he is one of the most optimistic, he figures out what the future should be, and he leads people there in an optimistic, caring way, which Rhett mentioned, leaders who care. And you definitely see that in the greatest leaders. So I'll stop there. It is an opportunity for leaders who create healthy cultures and, who have humility. They lead with humility, love, and service that Alan always talks about. And we do too. And I'm sure Rhett does. Leadership makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I use Alan's BPR system. In fact,
What does that mean?
it's too much to explain now.
Okay. Okay. I'll look it up later.
But look, I think Michael's right. We're in a seminal moment in history for sure. And, we've had them before. We've had them, I remember, when the internet came and, when we all started having desktops on our desk, and we've had these major transitions before. And AI is certainly a massive change. It's going to bring so much, but we've been living with AI for 20 something years. I mean, we've had it in our lives. We just didn't really realize it, but it's going to play a massive part, obviously. Look, the transition to quantum computing and AGI and climate and all of these things that are coming in on us to have to deal with. We're going to have massive changes. And I don't know that we're having the right conversations about how to deal with those changes. I don't know if it's time to start talking about a universal income. I don't know if it's time. I think it might be time to be talking about universal healthcare, because you are talking about possibly displacing 20-30% of the workforce.
That's not good for anybody.
Right. So are we having the right conversations? Are our leaders having the right conversations? I don't think so. But I feel really good about what this can do for humanity. I should be scared because of my age and what kind of work I do, right? I'm primed to be disrupted with AI and this technology, but I'm not overly worried about it. I think we will deal with those as a human race. I do think it will require us to rethink a lot of our structures and a lot of the way we think about work. I always talk about how one of my son's first summer jobs was a remote job. I think the way that they grow up and the way they're going to think about work is going to be way different than we ever did. Particularly you and Michael, you and I, what we thought of how work was going to go for our lives is a whole lot different the way they see it. So yeah, I think we're in for a moment. I think we're in for a moment of, a couple decades of real fundamental change. And I think it's exciting.
My heart goes out to the young people actually getting their start in their professional life, now and in the next couple years, because I think from a leadership standpoint, leaders are kind of like, oh, let's adjust. Like, how are we doing how are we doing this? How are we adopting AI? How are we leveraging our workforce to do more, better, faster? What we've been doing might not necessarily be necessary moving forward. And a lot
I
of
think
things are put into question.
we have to remember that these are tools, right? I think they're going to be human things that we do really, really well that AI is never really going to do great. And I think that they're things that AI is going to do a lot better than we can. And so I think that I just think we have to keep in mind that these are tools that we can use to make our lives better, and that there's a place for us. I know there's this sort of dystopian conversation around this, we lose, everything. I don't think so. I do think that there are still distinctly human things that are going to make people want to be together and be in person and have conversations over a dinner. I don't think our need and desire for human connection is ever going to go away. I think we're going to always need that. I think there's some work tasks that I think we will always be better at. So that's sort of probably maybe it's a naive view, but I do think that.
Yeah, I that really resonates with me. I think as humans, we have a blind spot, and this was my blind spot too. I was definitely an achieveaholic, going to business school at night, going to law school at night in my 20s, and then working on Wall Street. And I crowded out time for family and friends and started struggling emotionally and with addiction issues. And it was a wake-up call. I took a sabbatical. I turned down an offer to join Goldman Sachs and needed to reconnect with my family and friends, and then ended up writing a book about culture. That was the Fired Up or Burned Out book. It was very eye-opening for me, and it really changed my life. And now I'm intentional about not crowding out time for friends. I actually am in a men's Bible study, about 15 of us, from high school guys to guys in their 80s who meet. Some of us have been meeting for like 15 years now. So that's really important to me, and something I believe that a lot of people like me have that blind spot, don't appreciate how important connection is, and how as human beings we are wired to connect. We absolutely need it, and when we don't have it, we dysfunction. So just to reiterating what Red already said, I think we have both been around long enough that we've experienced that in our own careers, and what a joy it is to have connection in the workplace and in life outside of work. It's really important, and more the science shows that it affects our health and joy in life.
Slightly non sequitur, but the thing that I'm just kind of keeps sitting in my head. I mean, Red, I'm thinking about your sons, and I wonder if we're, the people that are going to be joining the workforce, they're still taking courses in my opinion, and studying for jobs that are indicative of a world that I don't think they're coming into. And that terrifies me. And so
Sure.
great. I'm thrilled that your son also was able to get a remote job. Also at the same time, like, man, what a miss. Like I almost wish that, like, I want him to get in the office. Like there's something different about that.
He's studying finance, which is going to be completely
Yeah. Yeah.
irrelevant.
Yeah, the machines are much better with like finance than like the humans are. Yeah, I agree. What are you going to sit in, like make some macros and everything in Excel and R and Tableau? Like, I mean, they can do it.
I mean, they're working on the Bloomberg terminals, but it's like, I mean, who's gonna listen to a 22-year-old financial advisor? Yeah, I don't think that's.
He needs to get your beard. So it's a few things. They're studying finance, accounting, or whatnot. I mean, there's probably an element of AI ultimately that's going to. I have a factoid actually from PwC that it says that AI is going to displace up to 30% of jobs. But literally, the school systems, the feeder systems of people coming into this are still studying for like a very different world. That, like, I mean, none of this stuff is caught up. It's going to be very uncomfortable for a certain period of time. But then even beyond that, I think that I don't know. Tell me what you guys think. I think there's something really special about, like, especially when you've just entered the workforce, connecting with people in person, the water cooler talk. I've told younger cousins as they were graduating, I was like, just go find the person you respect most in your industry and get them coffee. And I know it sounds unsexy or whatnot, but it's like the amount of information that you will learn ultimately just being in somebody's sphere that potentially actually has the want and interest to teach and mentor. I don't think any education can even remotely compare to that opportunity. So,
well, I think that also really resonates with me, Jackie. I think it reminds me, one of my former colleagues was world-class discus thrower. And, I remember he said to me one time, nobody gets to be world-class in athletics without multiple coaches. It just does not happen. And that is true with leadership too. And usually excellence in just about anything. So being intentional about reaching out and building relationships with people who can mentor you, who are older, who have skills that you don't have, that makes a huge difference. And the other thing I want to mention is a risk with remote work is, I know it's great in terms of convenience, and I really do appreciate that. It helps us, it reduces the stress in our lives when we don't have to, take the train into Manhattan every day. That was stressful. I can't say it was interesting for a while, but then it just over time became monotonous and a source of stress. But at the same time, if we're not, if we're just working alone, it makes us more vulnerable to loneliness and social isolation that, brings about that list of, anxiety, depression, addiction, risk of suicide, et cetera. So it's really important to understand that and try to get into a workplace and environment in person where you are energized and feel connected. That just, you become a better connector by doing that.
I'll tell you two things, 2 points. I have a good friend who I think he was voted least likely to succeed as a joke in high school. And I was not in class with him, but from what his friends and partner tell me, he was a class clown. But what he has done is he's built one of the biggest real estate companies in the state,
There you go.
commercial and residential. And the way he's done it is that he goes to every event. He goes to 2 or 3 events. He's done this for probably 30 years. He goes to 2 or 3 events a day, whether it's the Rotary Club or whether it's the Lions Club or whether it's the Baptist church, whatever. And every time somebody thinks of real estate, they think of him, right? He's so active in his community, so built a network of people. And the point of the story is build your network. And I talk to my boys about this all the time, right? It's that coffee that you talked about, going out and having these conversations, being active in the community that you're a part of, is a way to build a business. It's the way I built the toy company, by getting involved in the associations and in the, in all the things where people could help grow my business. Number one. Number two, I think being the most valuable player on the team. So, be willing to, early in your career, stay late if you need to stay late. I don't want to say subscribe to hustle culture, but be a valuable member on the team. Take opportunities to learn, take opportunities to volunteer for that tough project that nobody else wants, right? One of the ways I got promoted early in my career, I was with USAID early on. The reason I was able to get some of the things that I got were I was willing to go to Tajikistan and spend 2 years, right? I was willing to go take those tough assignments in places nobody else wanted to go, right? Because I was willing and I wanted the responsibility and I wanted the challenge. So I guess the point of that is, like, want the responsibility, ask for it, because most people aren't going to ask for responsibility. They're not going to ask to be accountable to things. They're not going to ask to do the tough things. So be a valuable person on the team, be a valuable contributor, and you'll see your career track really change. I think if you do that and you are intentional about building a network, you can go anywhere you want.
And I also caution for the leaders of, let's call it the leaders of the 20-year-old reds that are driven and those rising stars are people that you build your organization around. It's going to be important to be mindful when their team potentially also needs a break.
You can't let somebody burn themselves out.
Right.
Not what I was talking about, really. But
yeah, absolutely.
You absolutely have to be aware as a leader. If your junior person's working till 11 or 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning, that's not helpful. Right? Absolutely.
Michael, for leaders today, let's call it like established leaders. I don't know I don't know if the same advice applies to established leaders versus newer leaders. So like what kind of advice, like when you're working with various different leaders, what are you telling people, or what kind of advice are you giving them? And are these things that potentially anybody could do and consider and implement into their lives?
Well, a couple things come to mind. One is, and I really like the research of Ashley Harden at Washington American University on personal knowledge, it's called. And when we develop personal knowledge of the people we work with and we're responsible for leading, where did they grow up? What are their interests outside of work? That's my favorite thing to explore. What are their interests outside of work? And it really has a very positive effect on both of us. It increases, people are going to be more cooperative. This is what the research shows, and experience proves this out. People are going to be more cooperative, and they're less likely to undermine you as well. So some real tangible benefits just from taking the time to get to know them. And I also really like the positivity research from John Gottman at the University of Washington and Barb Fredrickson, who I know, who does fabulous work on kind of upward spirals of positive emotions. And, that research shows that an environment that's overwhelmingly positive in terms of just recognition and affirmation and helping each other, it really, it even impacts how much we see. Literally, it affects our peripheral vision and whether or not we connect the dots. It's fascinating to get into the research, but cultivating a positive environment is a skill that you learn, and it's really critical for leaders to do that.
I'm going to take a little different take on that question, Jackie. I read a report a couple months ago from Johns Hopkins that said, basically, if you believe politically, if there's a political differences, that 50% of Americans believe the person that has a different political view than they do is immoral. So that means a massive number of people in the US, and I would probably say this is probably indicative globally too, look at somebody that thinks differently or looks differently as a bad person. So I think that's actually impacting, and I was at a HR conference last week, and I think this bears out that our teams are having a tough time dealing with the divisions in society. They're bringing it to work, in other words. So I think I'd give all the regular leadership advice, but I think, to me, I would say really, really, really focus right now on how your team is feeling, what they're thinking, and can you bring them together as a team? Because guaranteed half of them believe one thing and half of them believe the other, most likely, right? If you look at sort of the division in society. So how do you bridge that gap? How do you get them to talk to you and communicate with one another? How do you get them to open up and function as a team and trust each other? I think that's really, really
if you can't trust anybody, or if you've had a situation where trust has dissolved, it's incredibly hard to rebuild that back. Have you actually even seen legitimate corporations turn around? Do you have to slash and burn the C-suite and everything?
Well, I think, I've seen two different examples. One was, we talked about Alan Mulally. We just bring him up as a great example. Alan really didn't have to, doesn't really fire people. He says, these are the expected behaviors. If you're not living up to the expected behaviors, and, Rhett mentioned the BPR meetings, Alan will meet with someone privately and say, okay, how did that go for you? We agreed to this, and, do you want to live up to it? And if you do, we'll help you. We'll give you feedback. We'll get you a coach if you need it. But if you choose not to live up to these expected behaviors, then you're choosing to leave, because we're all agreeing to this. And it doesn't mean I won't love you. That's what Alan will say, right? I'll still love you. You'll still be a friend, but you won't be here because, we're all agreeing to this. And that's one way to do it. And I can think of another example where a CEO led just a spectacular turnaround where he brought Gallup in. They did the Q12, and they fired the managers who didn't meet a certain level of culture based on the results of the Q12 employee engagement survey that Gallup implements. And he orchestrated, a very successful turnaround. So, I've seen different ways to do it, but in both cases, both leaders created a culture that met human needs for respect, recognition, belonging, autonomy, personal growth, meaning, and progress. And they turned it around. They just took different ways to go about it. So how about you? What have you seen?
Yeah, I see it. I've seen it happen in a lot of the companies that I work with. I'll take an example. I've got a 25-year-old, a family-run business down in Miami that we've been working with for a couple of years. And, when we first got there, they were shouting in the halls, and disagreements were verbal and loud, and now the complete turnaround in culture, and a culture of positive intent. It's a got your back culture now, as opposed to watch your back. And so, but that came with a true, it took an exec team and a management team that was committed to that change. And basically what you said, Michael, is using the sort of Alan's approach. This is how we're going to be. And you can choose to make that journey with us and choose to have positive intent when you deal with your colleagues. You can, choose that, or unfortunately, there's not a place, right? And that was how that, everybody signed a covenant to that effect. And some people didn't make the journey, and that's okay. That was actually okay.
I think leaving on good terms ends up actually being highly beneficial for the organization or the leadership. Ultimately, like leading with a human-centric approach and being a decent human to one another. I think what I've been hearing from you both just ends up delivering on multiple. I like to transition. I just want to go into the chat and address some questions, and then we'll wrap up with any final thoughts. Eric Blum, my experience in team building is by quickly figuring out what each team member's long-term goals are and finding a way to help them achieve that, even if it's outside of the organizational goals. How do you feel about this approach?
I think it's the right approach, right? If you can do that, if you have the time to do that with your team, and you can do that, I think it's a wonderful. I'll tell a quick story. I have a CEO client that runs a fairly small, like 250, 260 people now, and he goes to lunch with somebody every day. And goes to lunch. He'll sit on the park bench outside, or they'll sit at the picnic table, or they'll, on occasion, he may have to go to a restaurant down the street, but he goes to lunch with every employee every year. And what he does is he finds out how they're doing, how they're feeling, what they want to accomplish. And, they consistently win best place to work in their large city, for their category all the time. And it's because people know that he is looking out for them, that he asks questions, that he takes their feedback, that he listens, that he cares. And I think it does dividends for them. I mean, they are really, really great company and really solid. And he learns a lot, and he attributes that to their business growth every year.
Let's be honest, people make decisions also based on how they feel about an organization. You have autonomy in how you spend your money. And if you know and have goodwill or positive emotional connection to an organization, product, whatever it may be, if you have a choice between A and B, similar things considered, you're like, I like this company. I like what they stand for. This is where I'm going to choose to spend my money. I've done it regularly. I mean, right, you're nodding. I feel like this resonates with you.
Yeah, that was a very good question. And it just shows it's very consistent with what Peter Drucker meant behind management by objectives. Unfortunately, people interpreted management by objectives in a different way, but he really meant aligning the employees' objectives with the company's objectives. And that's when people are going to be the most engaged. So I think that was a great question.
All right, here's another one. Emotional, it might be a comment, but here we go.
And actually, to your point, Michael, should be a question you ask when you hire them.
Wait, what's the question now? Now I want to know it.
I think it's to Michael's point. These are questions you should ask people when you hire them.
Great. Yeah, I agree. Emotional intelligence is vital. It is not new. It's always been with us, and yet has been a bit of a lottery in the past. It starts with self-awareness and compassion. Without this, how can we connect in the right way with others? This is vital as a leader, as in our personal lives. We must have social awareness and situational awareness and the ability to act upon it. The big three numbers, revenue, profit, reinvestment, capability, depend on one thing: human connection built on trust. Yeah, that's Steve Hammond. Hey, thanks for the comment there. Sophia Petrus, she's actually put a few different comments in here, I think, through the flow of our conversation. So she agrees that we need human connection. However, we need to learn to set healthy boundaries and work and look after our individual well-being. We live in such a fast-paced world that everyone wants our time and energy, so we need to protect it. Yeah, I agree. I actually, her comment actually makes me like leadership, CEOs, owners. I guess it's lonely at the top, and here's your tiny violin and everything, but it's hard. Like, you are ultimately responsible on some level for people's, let's call it to some degree, people's well-being, people's financial stability, and which kind of flows through to their family stability. I think it's an incredibly hard job leading an organization in any capacity. Mike Palmer, I think I think it will push Gen Z to be more entrepreneurial and solopreneurial, to be setups for success. What do you guys think?
Well, you look at large corporations are gaining more share of the economy. And that's been going on for a long time. But they also, in some cases can behave like sociopaths. And there's a documentary and a book called The Corporation that made that point. And you can look at Purdue Pharma as an example in the whole opioid crisis. For society to be healthy, we need leaders who do care about people. And it's those organizations that will be successful in a sustainable way. And those who, don't, if they don't behave ethically, then they won't survive. So it's, large corporations bring together resources and create great things and are, in society. So I think it's good to have experience in both if possible. But as you get older, I think a lot of us have opted out of the larger corporations and want more autonomy. It's my personal feeling about that.
Yeah, what Michael said. I can't say it any better.
Chris McCusker, do you have any guidance to avoid burnout?
You want to take that one?
Recognize it that it's coming. And if you recognize those signs, I think, those signs are what disengagement and sort of maybe a lack of caring, or what have you. And if you recognize in yourself, I think you've got to do what you have to do to take care of yourself. I think one thing I would say is, when I first started my first company, one of the things I didn't do very well was the hobbies and I didn't do a lot well. I didn't take care of my health well. I didn't sleep well. I didn't eat well. I didn't do the hobbies and the things that I really, really love to do that make me me, right? I sort of disassociated myself, like friends and dinners and social and the activities that I like. So I would say try to analyze your habits. What are you doing that's making you tired, making you not want to be there, and try to change those habits, try to change those patterns that you're in, and try to do something about it. Don't let it get so bad where it puts you in some sort of crisis. Um, one of the things too is ask for time. I mean, sometimes you've got this bank of time. I was talking to somebody the other day. They've got 2 or 3 months of leave that they can take. They just never take it.
Is it a culture, though, that people don't take it, though? So, I mean, that's kind of a follow-up question to that.
It is. I mean, it is. But for their own well-being, they should take it and they should use it. And they're going to be more productive. And hopefully you work for somebody that wants you to be the most productive that you can be and the best that you can be. If you don't have that kind of environment, you feel like you can't take that leave, then maybe you're at the wrong place.
I think it's helpful to process that with a friend, a trusted advisor, and to, ask yourself, do you feel connected to your corporation's mission, its values, its reputation? Do you feel connected to your supervisor? Do you feel connected to the people you work with? Ideally, do you feel connected to the people you serve? We've done a lot of work in medicine with Yale New Haven Health and Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. A lot of people there are inspired because they feel connected to their patients, and it brings them a lot. And oftentimes there's some health issue in their personal background. And so, really exploring those connections with the trusted advisor can help you think about, identify changes you can make that will reduce the risk of burnout.
Sophia Petros, I'm kind of riffing off your comment in the chat. Do you guys have thoughts in terms of hiring for, the comment is organizations hire leaders with IQ, which lead people as long as that happens, which will always, sadly, there will always be toxic environments. EQ is imperative as part of leaders' capabilities. So I guess the question coming out of that is, one, how can, let's call it like organizations hire for valuing EQ just as much as IQ? So that's one question for either of you. And then I guess my personal question too is, I phrase this, gentle leadership. Is there a place for like a more like gentle leadership? Does that even exist?
Which one do you want to take? You go first.
Okay. I mean, I always try to hire for EQ actually over IQ. I actually don't call them soft skills. I call them essential skills. Like I think to me, I'd rather have somebody that is a great team player and understands understands how to read people, how to talk to people, how to operate, because I can train for the other skills. But I think I don't know how to break that pattern, honestly. I mean, people, how do we if you look at recruiting today and executive recruiting, you look at what people look for. I mean, they're looking for people that don't exist. And I think it just takes a balance. But I really like having people who have high EQs, and I hire for people who can, manage their emotions. That's what I look for. I look for somebody that's good under pressure, and to me, that's a more valuable person to me, and the kind of people I would want to work with.
To dive into that a little bit, is there a specific question, or do you just kind of through, multiple meetings or whatnot, like, are you able to assess that better? Like, can you figure that out?
Well, number one, I'm not hiring brain surgeons or, nuclear chemists or, I'm not. So I think, I'm not the people that I hire. I'm in the people business. So the people so this is probably not a great answer. It depends on, I guess, the kind of technical, business that you're in. But for me, it's, we do assessments and we work through and we do multiple interviews. We do team interviews. I've found the team interviewing process to be really effective in not only my business, but other businesses that we work with. So that's an idea.
Jackie, would you repeat the other question?
Is there a place, gentle leadership? I sometimes have this idea of what like a leader looks like, but is there a place for like somebody that's a little softer?
Well, I think someone who does care about people, is intentional about connecting with them, but then also on the task and results side, respects metrics, develops metrics, and holds people accountable. That's part of the job too. And if they're not getting the job done, then, figuring out what the obstacles are. And it may be, I've inherited some people who were in a position that really wasn't a good fit with their skill set, or they had grown to a point where they were no longer challenged, and they were fearful and not wanting to jump into something else that would challenge them. So I had to give them a little nudge and encourage them that they could do it, number one, but also it was manifesting in ways that were unhealthy for the team because they were frustrated. And so I think there's a place for a gentle, I think kind, personable, caring about people, but also task and results oriented as well as relationship oriented. Both are critical.
I would love to encourage everybody to connect with one another. Michael, do you have anything you wanted to share at closing?
Well, I would, encourage people, because connection is declining in our society. Just be really intentional about, building your support group with your family and friends in your community and in the workplace. And that's critical to helping you thrive and be successful in a way that's sustainable.
And I'm going to be a little selfish here and selfless. And I'm going to promote a new book that I have coming out in September. Be out September 30th. It is actually on pre-sale now. It's called Fundamentals. It's about how a leader's self-talk actually impacts team performance and team engagement and team productivity, and how you can stop that from happening. Actually, some interesting research, an interesting read, and it's on pre-sale now. It's called Fundamentals.
I saw the artwork for it. It looks totally up my alley. And thank you both so much for joining me. Thank you for your expertise and insights. It's absolutely been my pleasure.
Thanks, Jackie. Great to finally meet you.
Same.
Okay, thanks.